Is everyone able to hear me all right? Great. So I appreciate Penny allowing me a moment to gather myself, because that was some cuteness going on there. It is definitely my favorite time of year here at CCSM. My family's been part of this pageant, I think, for about 5 years, and it definitely renews my commitment to love and kindness in the world. And it really reminds me that it is a celebration that makes Christmas Christmas. And today we have an extra visitor of it being extremely cold, unseasonably cold here in California, which is not why I moved here. And during this time of Christmas, just recently, my own family, we put up our tree, as I'm sure many of you did, and it was quite picturesque. And I bring this up because I can't always achieve this. There was a fire in the fireplace and carols, and we were very excited that we didn't have to buy new lights, and that the lights, when we plugged them in, they worked just fine. And as we unwrapped all of our ornaments, we were on the lookout for our favorite ones as we told the stories. And when my 8-year-old son asked me why my ornament was my favorite one, I said, well, of course it's because it's from my friend Mary. And it's a tall, thin, wooden Santa Claus. And the ornament is really irrelevant, but it represents 25 years of our friendship and our life together. Now, Mary is a friend who I met when I was a child, and we loved many of the same things, like art and poetry, and we definitely disliked many of the same things, like 80s music, Duran Duran, and now pumpkin-flavored coffee. It's always good to have a friend who likes and dislikes the same things that you do. That makes them a true friend. But the funny thing about my friend Mary is that I have rarely seen her in the 25 years that I've known her. Almost at the time that we met, she moved away. Her family got a job in Guam. And then over time, we went to separate colleges, and we have moved here and there, and rarely ever in the same place. So that when I actually do see her, I feel incredibly blessed. Whenever I hear her voice on the phone, I feel overwhelmed with joy and with love. And so recently, I saw a painting that sort of expressed this. A painting of two friends, and their bodies, even though it was the stillness of a painting, it just was overwhelmed with joy and love as they reached out for each other, held onto each other's hands, and looked into each other's eyes. And the more I investigated this painting, I realized it was a picture of Elizabeth and the Virgin Mary. And I didn't ever really know that the two had ever met. This is a story in the book of Luke. And you might remember Elizabeth as the wife of Zechariah, who 2 weeks ago, Jolene shared the story of Zechariah, who became mute. And a much older Elizabeth was pregnant with the later in the story, John the Baptist. So recently, Elizabeth had been visited by the angel Gabriel. And when she was 6 months pregnant, Gabriel was busy visiting also the Virgin Mary, explaining that she too would be bringing a unique and wonderful and rare miracle into this world. And Mary immediately journeyed from her town to visit Elizabeth. And it is in this painting that the two meet. In some paintings, Elizabeth is old and Mary is young, and sometimes in the painting, they look to be about the same age. But the joy And that perfect moment of seeing someone that you haven't seen in such a long time, someone who you share so many memories and great times with. And in this time, they share that they have both been visited by Gabriel. And I like that story because we only hear of Gabriel really ever visiting Mary. And I worry about Mary sometimes in her story because I think of her as often alone, that she's received this great gift and she is alone in figuring out how to respond and how to be a mother. And later on, she is sort of out alone on a donkey and then in a dusty old manger. I know many people don't worry about Mary, a story that's over 2,000 years old, but sometimes I worry about Mary. What's going to happen next? So in this story, she has gone to see Elizabeth, her friend, but I find out that Elizabeth is also her cousin. And I realize that Mary is not alone, that she has never been alone, and she has no expectation of bringing this miracle into the world alone. And she and Elizabeth spend 3 months together. And I can imagine what these kinds of conversations might have been like. And these two women in seclusion, and Zechariah, of course, had nothing to add to the conversation. So there they were, these mothers. Elizabeth is said to bring John the Baptist, who is a representation of truth. And Mary brings forward, of course, God's grace to the earth. God's grace, which is love for love's sake. And I can imagine these two women wondering just how they are supposed to respond, but no matter what they do, they are in it together. And I learned even more that Elizabeth's mother was Sobi, and Mary's mother was Anne, and they were sisters. And the more and more I understand this painting, the more it represents how much help and support and love and family Mary had at the time of her pregnancy and of her birth. That this miracle was not just one of a manger, of a cold, dark night with a bright star. It was one of anticipation from a family that she was born into, and also a family that later she adopted and adopted her. And if I think about this child, Elizabeth's child, that is supposed to be truth, and I think about Jesus, the child that is God's grace, they are both children of love, waiting to be born into the world. And that is pretty magnificent. Love that is waiting to be born. And if I stop and think about this, love is an amazing gift that God has created for us. God might even have made love malleable like a shapeshifter, like the native tradition of a shapeshifter. Love that can move from the divine to the earth, to the afterworld. Love that can change shapes. We have a hand that we can reach out to a friend and offer a hand of love. We can wrap our arms around people that we only see at Christmas, and we have the arms of love. Love can grow so wide that we have an ocean of love for each other. And love can grow small to a twinkling of an eye. I know I have many memories of people in my life that I look forward to that one loving look, or as Elizabeth had, the sound of Mary's voice. And I think more about the idea of love, that it is not made of something we can see, and yet it can be very heavy, something that we can't move out of, and it causes us to be still. Martin Luther King says that love is such a force that it is the only thing that can make an enemy our friend. And that is why I share this reflection today, that it is important to tell and retell these stories of Advent, the stories surrounding the birth of Jesus, the stories of all the people leading up to the birth of Jesus, the stories of the lambs and the sheep and the innkeeper, the stories of the darkness and of the bright star. And it is a story that when we are able to listen and to sing in the coming of love into the world, that we are able to renew every year our commitment of love that we have for God and to one another. Amen.